Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. If you're like me, you became interested in the topic of psychedelic medicines due to an ever-burning curiosity to understand the quote-unquote bigger picture happening within this experience we call life. For me, following this curiosity has allowed me to become much more aware. However, like you may have heard of before, awareness is simply the first step, yet not the entire picture. Being able to truly embody the awareness you gain from these experiences through integration is a whole other topic. And when I meet individuals such as today's guest, who so clearly have been able to move through this embodiment process aforementioned, I take great honor in sharing them with each of you, as my goal is to always leave you with practical, real-world examples of what these sometimes quote-unquote far out or more qualitative aspects to life can bring forth in our lives. Along with being a proponent behind the conscious, responsible utilization of psychedelic medicines in his life, he is a devoted family man, incredible coach where he helps to bring consciousness and deep truths to leaders, and someone who lights up the hearts of those he holds dear in his life. And in today's episode, you will be getting an inside look at the inner workings of his perspectives of life, his current lifestyle, and much, much more. So please, help me in welcoming my man, Jacob Metzger, to the show. Jacob, my man, it is a pleasure to have you here with me today, man. How's your day going?
Phenomenal. Stupendous. Glorious. Abundant.
Yes. I'll take nail on the head for 4 of my favorite words, please. Especially when they're in unison, and for everyone listening, Jake and I were just talking about, how our lives right now are going fucking awesome. Not without challenge, right? And I like a challenge. I like a good challenge. And I think really it's all about the perspective that we bring to these things. And speaking of perspectives and all of these kind of things, right? And opening the mind and creating self-awareness, Jacob, I'm interested for you, man. How did you first become interested in the topic of psychedelic medicines in your life? Because we both grew up during DARE. We both grew up after the Just Say No campaign, right? So what allowed us, right? I know. You know what DARE stands for? This is a classic 6th grade thing. Drugs are really expensive, so.
Man, I remember attending those meetings, and I went to a Lutheran school in grade school, and we had DARE probably once a month. So I got into, psychedelics was pretty much right in high school. It was always very intriguing to me okay, what are the capacities? I remember reading once that we only use like 10% of our brain. And this was obviously years ago. And I'm like, oh, shit. I want to use more. I want to be a legend, a master, and use all my cerebral activity to, do good in the world and contribute to others. And so that was kind of like the gnosis that led me into, it started with cannabis, and then it just kind of escalated and got more... Well, from there.
It's a snowball effect, and I think that as opposed to the story that we get, which is the gateway drug, right, with cannabis or any of these things being gateway drugs, right? Like they are the gateway, similar to all of life, to whatever you choose, either consciously or unconsciously, for them to be the gateway to, right? And so, this speaks to obviously why,
Amen.
I teach people about emotional awareness and all these things. Like, I think your work, I imagine, is very similar, right? Like the thing you're teaching is not really the thing you're teaching, and I go into this paradox a lot with conscious cannabis. It's like, I am teaching that, but I'm not really teaching that, because in order to be conscious with cannabis, it takes being conscious in all the other aspects of your life, right? To have cannabis work well, it takes a healthy diet, it takes good sleep patterns, it takes movement, all of these things. And so I love that, man. And I'm curious for you, this is just a hunch, but I'm just curious. Did you watch The Matrix as a young kid? Did that influence you at all? Because I've been asking a lot of people this question because I've been realizing how much it influenced me. And watching it again recently was wild because I picked up on so many things that obviously now I'm like, oh man, nail on the head. So I'm curious, did that movie influence you at all?
To me, The Matrix has always been a documentary and not a Hollywood movie.
100%. Dude, I love that line. Tom Bilyeu has a shirt that says The Matrix was a documentary. And I cackled so loud when I first heard that, man. It's so funny.
That's right, man.
And I'm curious for you, Jacob, like when you got into psychedelics, do you remember the first experience where you really had something profound happen? Because if you're like me, like what happened was the first couple of times I tried cannabis, for instance, I didn't even know what I was to expect. I didn't know then if I was going to like what came forth. And so it took me a couple of times to actually get like my footing enough to actually be able to be in the experience without it happening to me. And so I'm curious for you, like, first of all, did you have something like that happen? And then also, do you remember the first time that you had like a very profound experience with any of these mind altering medicines?
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. I'll start with cannabis. I loved cannabis because it really brought me into my feminine in a really beautiful way. And it brought a lot of unity and harmony between my masculine side and my feminine side. And so I just have so much reverence for cannabis. But one of my, I've had so many profound experiences with psychedelics, but the one that's coming through right now is DMT. And I was in a awesomely sacred space with one of my best buddies. And long story shorter, I'm hitting the DMT pen and not really feeling anything. And then I hit it again, and we're just passing it. We're both laying down on these biomats, passing it back and forth to each other. And I take like my third or fourth hit, and all of a sudden, it was like I was just zooming out of my objective experience. Like I was zooming out of who Jacob was as a personality and being. And all of a sudden, I'm in this sea of rainbow-colored stars. There's just this ocean of rainbow stars everywhere around me. And I'm just in total awe of what that was. And then, dude, the most wild thing happens. I am dancing like a snap, and there's this reflection of me. It looked just like the version of me that I was when I did this. And we were naked, and we were dancing together. I was looking into my own eyes, and we were naked, and we were just holding each other and dancing through the sea of rainbow-colored stars. And dude, that was just indescribable. That experience, and what that revealed to me was such a kinship and a friendship and an allyship with every timeline of myself. It was this feeling afterwards of younger Jacob, little Jacob, I love you. I see you. I'm so fucking proud of you. Now, Jacob, I love you. I see you. I'm so proud of you. And then future Jacob, it was just this synthesis of unconditional love and admiration for who I was as a being.
Wow. That is absolutely epic. This is one of my favorite parts of doing this show is just hearing all of the possibilities within the infinite spectrum of possibility that people are experiencing with psychedelics. And DMT is an interesting one too, because, I've had experiences with both types, if you will, of DMT, NN and 5-MeO. And NN is very similar to like what you described. I imagine that's what you were connecting with. It's like a lot of geometrical patterns, beautiful colors. But for some reason, it's always been interesting. And this is probably something to look into in a past life regression or something. But whenever I hit DMT, NN DMT, it immediately goes to the right side of the back of my head, and I just get like a really tight headache going, like a tension headache. Very interesting stuff. And I haven't really looked into it too much, but it's not the only time in my life these headaches pop up. And I actually had a guy that I met recently, just recently had him on the show. His name is Brandon Thomas. He's fucking awesome. He has a podcast called Expanding Reality. But, he was saying, he's like, dude, that's probably like a past life injury. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's always the same place I get these weird headaches. But with 5-MeO, I don't get that whatsoever. But the experience is so different. Have you ever connected with 5-MeO, DMT, or Bufo or anything like that before?
Not Bufo. I was being led into the experience, and I obviously had total trust for my friend who led me through it. So he told me it was DMT. I'm not sure of the specifics.
Gotcha. Yeah, the 5-MeO.
And he obviously came from a really great source. And
did you do it in like a vape cart, like that kind of style?
Yes.
Yep. Those are, what a time to be alive in 2023 when you can put DMT into a vape cart. I remember like trying those at music festivals and just being so confused. Like, how are people doing this? And then like doing anything, right, in my younger years. And then realizing obviously what I was getting into and being like, wow, I was really silly to do that at the music festival, but live and learn, and luckily came out okay. And this is one of the reasons, guys, I do this podcast. So you don't have to do the silly same mistakes I made, and I don't see them as mistakes. I see them as all happening for me. But yeah, if I can, definitely educate based on past experience and now understanding and knowing thyself more, all the better for sure.
All leads to deeper integration, definitely. Deeper truth of who we really are.
And I'm glad you brought up integration, because this is another question I like to ask people. Integration, you can get a lot of different, definitions depending on who you ask. Like, how do you see integration and how do you personally practice integration? And I imagine there's a big range, right, depending on who you are in that particular moment. But what are some of your favorite methods for integration? Put it that way. What are some things you lean on?
Nature. To sum it up really simply, I don't feel called to do many psychedelics nowadays. I don't even keep cannabis at my house anymore because my past I think I've shared this with you privately, but my past relationship with it was, I haven't developed the healthy boundaries yet to this beautiful herb that I have a relationship with. So I don't keep it at my house anymore. I use it when I'm connecting with friends or visiting family, and it's reserved for special experiences. But anytime I do, whether use cannabis or maybe do a mushroom journey, always 100% of the time after that, I'm immersed in nature. Grounding my feet to the earth, grounding my feet to the electromagnetic field of Mother Gaia. There's a unity to being in nature, and just having my feet in the water or bathing in a mineral-rich river. That is the heart of what integration is to me. Being away from technology, being with consciousness.
Yeah, and the perfect word is being instead of doing. Exactly. And I think I'm really glad I asked you, because I think that for me, for many years, and I imagine many people listening, they hear the term integration and they're like, oh, there must be things I need to do. And that's the same trap that the ego gets you into, right? Because the ego believes there's things you must do, right? In order to be worthy, you must achieve, right? So our whole entire lives have been built on what we do and who we are in this 3D realm, rather than what we are truly, the more infinite divine nature of us, right? Because we're divine beings having a human experience, And so I love the idea of nature, because really it's like processing time. That's how I've always thought about integration. It's not the time to go stack more shit in an already compiled traffic jam that is the mind, right? It's time to actually improve that traffic jam by taking cars out of it. And nature just has this way of doing its thing. That's the best part. You can just surrender to it. There's nothing you need to do. One of my favorite things is just hammocking after, like just hanging out. And especially after psilocybin, because I find this beautiful, beautiful state after I come out of an experience. Like once I start touching ground, where I just have absolutely no mind online. And I can just stare at, like, literally, I could stare at the ceiling and just be completely fulfilled, blissed out. And, that's something that I can get in deep meditation and other ways too. But I know it's always going to come at the end of a mushroom experience. And so I love being either in the yard or hammocking or something like that when that zone happens. So I can allow myself to just, be on vacation vibration and just allow myself to be and, tune into the fact that I'm worthy doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is nothing. And I don't need, it's kind of like Ram Dass says, there's nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to be, and so I love that kind of, experience, because it really just brings you into the present moment and allows you to, really ask good questions too. Like, who am I? Like underneath all of this, who am I if I'm not a podcast host, a cannabis coach, any of these things? And I think that the more you ask those kind of questions, the deeper answers you'll get. And the cool thing is there's not one answer, like that's why I love asking myself that question every morning and doing a quick little journal prompt on it, because some of the answers are very left brain, they're very logical. Sometimes though, I get into these flows that I get some really interesting answers, and so it's really cool.
I love that.
Absolutely, man. And I'm curious for you too, as someone who's done a lot of men's work, both with yourself and also with clients, I've seen a interesting correlation between a lot of men seeking out psychedelics to make up for the lack of rites of passage that are currently missing in society, specifically around men. And I imagine women have their own thing, but as two men, we'll talk to the men's side. So I'm curious for you, like, what are your thoughts around that, right? Psychedelics as rites of passage, the lack of rites of passage going on right now that oftentimes did include psychedelics, but oftentimes did not as well. What are your thoughts on that? I know this is kind of a broad topic, but just take it wherever you want. More cooking than baking, as always.
I don't believe psychedelics are needed for that process for men. And if a man feels called to it, to go deeper into that journey, so be it. As long as he's surrounded by other men playing life at the level that he wants to play at in terms of his masculinity, that's the best ever. That is something severely lacking in our culture, and that's a big rabbit hole to go into of why. But yes, whether with psychedelics or not, men need a rite of passage. They need to come to a place where they just like put their sorcerer staff in the ground and this is who I am. And enough is enough to what's no longer serving me.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the challenges I've found is that with the rites of passage that have included psychedelics throughout time, it wasn't just like they give an otherwise uninitiated mind a bunch of psychedelics, right? Like there was training going into it. There was talk about values and kind of what you stand for. There was attention brought to being emotionally aware. There were just these deeper teachings that, in our modern day world that is so fast paced. And yes, we have great technology. It allows us to do things like this. I'm not dissing it, but it's almost the cart being before the horse, right? Like it's almost like eating your dessert before you have dinner, and I'm not a rules guy, but anytime I've done that, it hasn't worked out too well, And so being able to right now, I think a lot of people are suffering, right? A lot of people are stuck in fear and shame and guilt and these lower, denser emotions and states of awareness. And so, I think people see the popularity right now around psychedelics and they go, oh my goodness, these are going to fix me, right? And first of all, there's nothing you need to fix. There's nothing broken in you, right?
We're not broken.
Yeah, that's the first thing, And then second of all, the degree that you think anyone can fix you, I've had people say, oh, when did you start becoming a healer? And I'm like, I'm not really a healer at all. Like, I don't do any of that. I simply bring awareness and make sure people don't stand in their own way. Like I've always thought of what any good coach does is like bumper bars, right? Like your client still needs to throw the ball, right? And still needs to make sure that he or she is fit to throw the ball. But when the ball is going down, you can play bumper bars to make sure that that ball hits the strike every time, And so obviously it's not an exact metaphor, but I think it does the trick. But being able to understand these things beforehand is super pivotal. And I'm curious for you, like, what do you think some of the things that you believe are important to know before connecting with psychedelics for anyone, men, women, you can take this any way you want, but what are some of the things that you would recommend in terms of if someone is interested in these medicines, yet maybe they are unaware of what they don't know, then what would you say are some of the important things that, you would teach someone to have before they connect with these medicines?
Number one is make sure you are in a totally sacred space. That was, and I think you told me once upon a time, Ryan, you did so too, but using psychedelics in a unconstructive space, it's just a breeding ground for disaster, psychologically, especially. I mean, I know some people who are still recovering from having a cannabis gummy, and it was too much for them, and they went to a party, and they're still battling with the demons that they had to face that evening. So, number one, make sure you're in a sacred space with people you trust, people you feel safe with. That's crucial. So safe space, number one. Second is be intentional. What do you want to use these psychedelics for? Do you want to integrate some trauma? Do you want to connect with something in your future? Do you want to just be abundantly clear about what it is you want to get out of the experience? And then number three, surrender. Surrender to what the medicine gives you and know in your heart that that is what was given to you for the highest good.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Dude, I love that last one, especially because the way in which I describe this to people when they're like, well, what do you mean surrender, right? Like, it's such a charged term. And I'm like, think of it this way, right? If you want to start carrying some stuff and you currently have a backpack that is overflowing with stuff already, well, you're going to have to subtract from that backpack before you add to it. And so the medicine can only work, and this goes for any of these medicines, and includes coaching or anything, right? Like any development that you want can only work to the level that you have space to actually receive it. You know, I love being able to share that because that was like, you know, I feel attacked. Most of my story growing up was how much can I fit in this backpack, and glorifying the fact that I can fit a lot of my backpack, when in reality, really what I was doing is just screwing myself, because, you know, that's how you get analysis paralysis, decision fatigue, and that's how you burn out. And best case, you burn out and you just get burned out, right? Worst case, like you were saying, you have to battle a lot of demons, because when you're connecting with psychedelic medicines, you open up the opportunity, or rather the challenge, of potentially opening up what, you know, Kabbalah refers to as the abyss. You know, other people, you know, refer to it as many things, but, you know, it's where compulsions and addictions and all of these like challenging demons live, right? And you also have the subconscious too, which is your own personal demons and things like that. But, you know, again, if you go into it unaware, these things can come forth. And that's why, like, you know, I tell everyone, like, it doesn't mean that you can't enjoy these medicines, right? It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean you have to be somber, right? It just means that you have to be really clear of why the hell you want to do them to begin with. You have to make sure, like you said, you're with really solid people. If you're with anyone, especially, like, I always recommend having someone around just to help you out. It's wildly hard to go to the bathroom when the walls are melting, you know? And so things that, like, you know, are funny to think about, but also, like, you know, there's things of like, well, hey, what if something does go awry and you get really paranoid? Well, someone who's in a sober state of mind can talk you out of it real quick and help you realize you took a medicine, the medicine's working, it's not going to last forever. And before you did it, you knew this was a possibility, right? So being able to talk some sense into, you know, the person that is going through the experience can really help a lot. And so I love those tips, man. I think they're extremely important and also practical, right? Like, I think everyone can understand those from a deep level.
Yeah. I want to back up for a second about being around trustworthy and safe people. I mean, when we are in that fluid and open state, we pick up on other people's stuff. And so those demons, and you know, fill in whatever word resonates with you, those couldn't even be yours. That could be just stuff you picked up from the quality of people you're around. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just really let it land. Do it with good people.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, because you're in an open, vulnerable state, right? Like, you know, you are able to be, I don't want to say preyed upon, that makes it very victim-y, but for lack of a better term, you're able to pick up some shit that is not yours, right? So now, going back to the backpack analogy, there's people behind you throwing shit in your backpack, right? After you've already emptied it, right? And you're like, I did my part. I emptied my backpack. Well, did you? Did you make sure it was closed and had a lock on it so no one else could open it from behind and throw their shit in there, you know? And who are the kind of people that want to throw their shit, or maybe not want to, but who are the people whose shit end up in your backpack? Probably people that are unaware that they're putting shit in your backpack, right? And so, you know, again, it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
I call them energy drainers.
Yeah, exactly. Energy vampires, energy drainers. Like, that is the antithesis of my first core value, which is battery charging, right? Like, that's like the number one way I want to be received in the world. Is how I know and discern what people, places, and things are right for me. It's like, do I leave this feeling charged? If so, fuck yeah, keep sending it, you know? And I think, you know, again, psychedelics can be a training ground for life. You know, they don't have to be, they're not the only thing that can be, but they can teach you a lot about this awareness of like, okay, yeah, the people I'm around, do I feel safe around them? And, you know, it's funny, it took me years to really understand what safety meant, you know, and how to actually feel safe. And of course, it all starts internally, as everything else does. But having people around you that help you feel safe is definitely, to use a negation, definitely doesn't suck to have that. So,
indeed.
Yeah. So, you know, you mentioned a little while ago that, you don't connect with many psychedelics at this, point in your life. Tell us a little about that, right? Like, was it something conscious that you made, or was it just like, I just feel like my life is psychedelic at this point. I don't really need more. Like, because a lot of people come to me and they want this, right? They want this ability to be able to take things, leave things, not feel like they need them. But they're currently somewhere where they feel like the opposite. And so I love having people share their experiences of how they got to this. Was there a point where, and I guess we can go into this too here, was there a point when, you mentioned a little bit with cannabis where you were connecting with these things a lot, or now, you're not connecting as much? Kind of what changed in there? And I know this is a huge question, but just take it wherever you want to take it.
Using psychedelics for me, and I didn't know this then when I was very heavy into communing with them, but what I know now is I use them to love the parts of myself that have never received my love or have never received love in general. And to be transparent with you and your listeners, I'm at a point now, and God, I'm so grateful and honored to mean this, that I'm at a place in my life where I really love who I am. And I almost get teary-eyed thinking about it, because that was not the case, for a lot of my life. And I practice those. I train my psychology, like going to the gym and building muscles, like every day. I'm training my psychology to see the greatest in life, see the greatest in myself, see the love and divinity that I am and that others are. And so for me, it just got to a point where I grasped, I received what I wanted to receive from psychedelics. And now I'm just riding the wave. I'm riding the bliss wave. And again, don't get me wrong, I don't not experience challenges. The only people who don't experience challenges are in graves.
Yes.
Right? We all have challenges. They help us grow. So that's not to say that I won't ever use psychedelics again. That's not true at all. I look forward. I've never done ayahuasca. I genuinely look forward I genuinely look forward to a ayahuasca ceremony. And in the meantime, I love being alive. I'm so grateful for the gifts that I get to give and the man that I am.
Dude, I love that, man, because, that is the ultimate, that is the journey, right? Like the journey is becoming more of what you truly are. What is that? Love, because it's the governing force of the universe. It actually paradoxically is the only thing that exists. And so everything in the context of everything is love. But yet how we choose to see that love depicts our actual reality, right? Through belief systems and things like that. And I think it's really powerful because, for me, that's a lot of what I have realized too, is that, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, that when I go into these experiences, it's not like I don't feel challenges, just like I do in my sober state of reality. But the difference is that maybe because I don't have as much of an ego or default mode network online, I'm able to just accept and love those challenges, right? And I'm talking sensations in the body when it comes to psychedelics or thought patterns, things like that. But in doing so, you have the experience of what we talked about earlier. There's nothing that needs to be fixed, right? Like this whole life is not about fixing anything. It's more about being able to come back to wholeness through, seeing the amazing parts of you that you love and society loves and all of these things, but also seeing the parts of you that maybe society has told you are bad, right? Or someone else around you led you to believe are not divine. That is the process that is often known as shadow work, right? Of, being able to see how you have the potential to be anything and everything within you, right? From Hitler to Gandhi. And so in doing so, you see that everyone has that capability within them. And so there becomes no judgment, just once again, clear discernment, right? Like I tell everyone, this is not, yes, you want to love everyone, but you don't want to get walked all over, and you don't have to say yes to everyone. You don't have to have toxic people around you, right? Not that they're toxic in nature, but they're displaying, let's say, toxic traits based on malware programs from the subconscious, yada, 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 whatever, right?
Yes.
We can have discernment and choose that that's not our flavor of ice cream and draw a boundary, but we don't judge or we don't, brash that person, right? Because at the end of the day, we realize like, well, fuck, it's kind of like the analogy I give for this is if you get cut off in traffic, what does the ego want to do? It wants to keep you safe, right? So it wants to tell you that that person's an asshole. How dare they? Yada, 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 right? You might even get road rage. Who knows? But when you go through these processes more, you can be quicker to catch yourself and go, wait a minute. I remember when I've got really stressed out and cut people off and maybe flip them off or whatever in the past. And so, yeah, I might not want to go eat dinner with that person, right? And have them be my best friend, at least not right now. But I'm also not going to judge them and think that just because someone flipped me off in traffic, they're a terrible person, And when you can start doing that, right? Like, again, it all starts internally, but then your world starts changing, right? Same events, right? Same, if you will, objective, events happening, but different subjective experience of it, different subjective view of it and perspective. And so I think that's super powerful because, this is the quote unquote work. And I want to find a different word for that because I don't like the term work. I think for most of us, it's kind of like what saying God was to me when I was like 17. I was like, you're losing me. It's kind of like, I heard someone change out the word work for love. So instead of I'm working on myself, I'm loving on myself. And if love is the North Star, right? Like put it where attention goes, energy flows. So yeah, it's interesting, man. But yeah, that's one of the words that just doesn't resonate with me anymore. Like, I don't want to say the word
I love you, dude.
I love you too.
I freaking love
you. I'm curious. Do you resonate with that? Like, I'm big into words and stuff. And to get into these states, I think are psychedelic states. So it's very on brand for the show. I know you're big into language too. Like, what do you think about the word work? Have you figured out, like, have you thought into this? Have you thought into any word that maybe you would use that, you like more? Tell me a little bit about that. I'm just genuinely curious.
Nothing has meaning besides the meaning we give it.
Yes.
So the word work to me may represent something completely spiritual and delicious. Now, does it? I don't have a negative association to work. It's more neutral. Like I don't find it to be like a super transformative word, but I also don't mind it. So if it feels like to your guidance system, if working on myself doesn't feel true, change it to a word that stokes you up.
Fuck yeah.
I'm loving myself. I'm, progressing myself. Yeah. I'm transforming myself. Like even those, like feel better in my body personally.
Yes.
And Ryan, our words they have a biochemical effect on our physiology. So there's this fine line between, especially with the feminine side of all of us, to just express naturally what you're experiencing. And then the masculine side is like, okay, but I want to use discernment with the words that I'm using because I know they have a effect on my physiology. And so, it's funny for me to be in that dance. Like Karina and I, for example, whenever I need to just release something from my body, like if I'm upset or angry about something, I'll ask her to be in the masculine to support me. And I'll just like go on a tangent, like, oh, fuck this and fuck that. And I'm so blah, 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 blah. And just go on a little rampage. And then after like a minute or so of just getting that out of my body, then I'm the clear channel again.
Yes. Dude, I'm glad you mentioned that because, one of the things I've found in my journey is that I think a lot of people think that when you're on a spiritual journey, you can't have anger or you can't have these things or that it means it's some sign that you're not enlightened or any of this bullshit, right? And I say bullshit not in a judgmental way, but just like I used to believe these things. So I'll call it bullshit in my own experience because it was so confining, right? To think that like I can't have actual human reaction. Like you were saying earlier, we're not here to be whatever perfect is. We already are perfect in our divine nature, but we're here to be messy and color outside the lines and learn and grow and evolve, right? And so, the ability for us to be able to express our emotions in healthy ways and what you just described is healthy, right? Like if you think about kids, right, which are our biggest teachers when you really think about it, what do? They're in a state of joy. They then have an emotion come up. They haven't learned yet that they shouldn't release it or that it's a bad emotion or any of these things. And so they just throw the tantrum. They don't care if they're in the middle of a store or in their bedroom. They're going to throw this tantrum. And after a certain amount of time, they've either cried or screamed themselves out and they go back to joy.
They're over it.
Yeah, exactly. And what do adults do? We become adulterated, which basically means we just pile all this shit on. It's the backpack analogy, but now you're wearing 20,000 backpacks. Crazy.
Dude, have you ever read Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers?
No, but I've heard about it before.
It's a really heady book, very scientific, but phenomenal. And I'm not going to do it justice by summing this up, but that book reveals scientifically why wild animals don't get trauma. Just like children, like say an antelope is being chased by a lion. And that antelope gets away, that antelope will just sit in place and shake and shake its body and make noises and just it move. Emotion is just energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like children, wild animals, they release that pent up stress or trauma or whatever they experience, and they release it through their voice, through their physiology, through any means that they can. And that's why they don't hold on to BS or pain.
That's so funny, man, because I've definitely heard about, now I remember I've heard about the book. I went to a retreat years ago, Training Camp for the Soul. You probably heard about it. It's big in the community, but they taught us about TRE, tension and trauma release exercise, and the whole story about how the gentleman who essentially founded this, he didn't find it because it's a natural human reaction, but he kind of mastered it. So he was in World War II, I think, in the bunkers, like the bomb shelters. And he would notice that whenever the bombs dropped, the kids would go through that shaking response, but the adults wouldn't. So he started asking them, and they were like, oh, no, we feel the urge to do that. We're tough. So we're just going to hold it in. And it's so fucking true, right? Like, our bodies are meant to be able to heal themselves, right? And so a lot of times the challenge becomes we get in our own way. And so again, it's like this theme I've been really big on in my life of just subtraction. Like, how can I subtract from the equation of myself, meditate more, have more free time in my day, spend more time in nature. And I wouldn't say that I'm perfect at this, because luckily right now I have a fucking awesome thing going and yada, yada, yada. And there's a lot of stuff going on. But I do notice now when I'm in moments like this where I'm like redlining and, it's all calculated, but at the same time, it's been, definitely a lot. I realize like, ooh, yeah, there's this underlying angst or even frustration when I don't have enough space in my life, And so, because again, it's like, if something traumatic happens, even if it's just like Rachel and I get in a disagreement, it's like I have to go do something after. Usually it's like a packed day. I don't have that time to just sit there and like go for a walk, vibrate a little bit and tremor and get it out of me, and then, go formulate a discussion to remediate things with her, And so, we've been fortunate enough to find, ways through it, of course, because we both have a similar schedule, but it does add an added challenge to it, and I'm curious, have you found that same thing? And I imagine the answer is going to be yes, but I like asking anyway, is, when you have more space in your life, does things just flow a little bit easier?
100%. And I have over 70 clients and probably meet with like 30 or 40 of them a week. So that's, that adds up quick. I'm a big proponent of slowing down to speed up. So in between client calls or meetings or whatever I have going on, I've conditioned myself to do this. I always, like after this podcast, I'll take off my headphones, I'll sit down in some meditative pose, take a few cyclical sighs or some deep breaths, and just close my eyes for a minute. Let my brain and nervous system just kind of digest and integrate the experience. And so then, after that, I set an intention. Okay, who do I want to be moving forward in this day? And that, just those little, I call them brain breaks, like those little brain breaks throughout the day, even if I'm packed, it's amazing how much more psychological and physiological just energy and vitality you have to be of service and to give.
Definitely.
And, something you mentioned, Ryan, about subtracting things. That is, I want to go into this because I feel this is so important to understand. We have to remove what's not working first before we include, and I'm thinking of your analogy with the backpack and stones, before we include more things that will support us. And so for those listening, just make sure before you make a change in your life, you have to remove the patterns and habits and programs of the old self, so to speak. You have to decondition or unprogram the old self in order to reinvent and reprogram the new self.
Definitely. 100%. I'm glad you brought attention to that, because it's the same thing as like, a lot of people want to add on to their metaphorical house, but what is your house built on? How strong is the foundation? And so you could buy this fucking awesome house, right? But if it's on a shaky foundation, that shit's going to fall down. And I think that's when I look around at my own journey and also my clients' journeys and just what I'm seeing in the world, it's like, there's just so much rat race going on, and there's so much go, go, go. And especially with the instant gratification of dopamine hits through social media and all things that are not objectively bad, just things to keep aware of. But again, like, I can't even imagine what it's like growing up right now, being a 14 or 15-year-old with Instagram. Like, yikes. I'm so
Dude.
grateful that I
Yeah.
didn't really get into social media until I was, 19 or something like that. So yeah. And that's
Same.
still young, but still it wasn't 13 or 14 or even younger. So,
Oh, dude, I really feel for Gen X, and I mean, you're a millennial, right?
yeah, millennial. Yep.
Dude, we grew up in such a great time.
Yeah.
Like, damn.
We had cell phones
Right?
that texted only, but no social media. It was perfect.
Yeah. Right as technology was beginning its major advancements, but like we were right in that interim of still, well, yeah, that's a deeper thing to get into.
No, 100%. I mean, it's so funny, man. Like when I talk to, Gen Zers of the modern day or whatever, and, it is interesting because again, like I think it's programmable that we're all going to think that like, oh, like our thing was the best, but our thing was really fucking cool, man. Like our time, because we still had to come home when the streetlights were on, but we knew how to get in touch with our friends easier. You know what I mean? So, but it wasn't so full yet that it is now, and again, like, I love technology. And I think one of the psychedelic things I've experienced recently, talking about psychedelic weird stuff that happens, is the fact that we all go around saying that technology is so addicting, right? And in one sense of the word, you could easily look around and make that correlation equal to causation. But also what I've noticed is that, let's say I go to a retreat, or the other night I went to my friend Jill and Madhava's house, and we had a beautiful, dinner, and just like they had some people over, and we had a beautiful little cannabis ceremony. All of a sudden, my phone didn't exist for 5 hours. I didn't even think to look at it, right? And so I always like to look at the root cause of things, right? Coming from health and everything too. And it's like, well, the root cause, like, is technology really addicting? Or are we just unfulfilled / bored / scared, like, or / insert other thing here that would be root cause, and I'm curious if you've ever thought of that. I love bouncing these ideas off people because they're just ideas for me. I have no idea if they hold up in a court of law, but it sounds pretty interesting based on my experiences.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think technology is inherently addicting, and we have tons of research and data with how that affects our dopamine receptors, like logging on Instagram. And then also, you're right, there's a source cause that many humans aren't touching. And like for me, I know even I'm doing work that I love, I would consider myself very fulfilled. And I have to have very clear boundaries in place with my phone, especially in the mornings and at night, because I know if, for example, I look at my phone right when I wake up, that's going to have a domino effect on the rest of my day. So I have very clear, very disciplined to, okay, no phone for until I'm done with my morning process, and no phone within 30 minutes of going to bed or an hour of going to bed. Definitely. So it's both, in my opinion.
It's like we were talking about at the beginning, right? Like to really understand something, you need to look at it from like, essentially infinite, but let's just say 10, throw it around a number, 10 different perspectives, right? Like, you need to look at it from like all angles to be able to actually go, okay, well, maybe there is a little part of me that's unfulfilled or something, but there's also this part of me that like is just lacking a boundary around social media, right? And maybe there's this other part of me that doesn't have a nighttime ritual, or a morning ritual established, right? So that I don't feel the need to go get dopamine from something that essentially I have to keep going to all day, and so I love being able to look at things like that.
Ryan, you want to go through a cool exercise with me?
Hell yeah, dude, let's go. You had me a cool exercise.
So have you ever heard of the 6 human needs?
Yes, I have. I don't know if I remember them right off the top of my head, but I have heard of them.
Okay, so get this. So certainty is like the first human need. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much comfort and certainty do you get with using your phone?
Ooh, I would say 0. Like there is no certainty with it. Like because when, this might be particular to me, but a lot of what I'm doing on there is like, lead generation and things like that. So it's all up in the air. It's like, I don't know what this is going to do. Right. And so I would say certainty, like there's not a whole lot. I mean, I could say like, okay, put it this way though, with certainty with like, I'm going to go on there and find something cool to look at, 10. Like I'm going to find something certain, but a lot of the things I'm doing when I really think about them don't have that much certainty to them, if that makes sense.
Right. But when you go on Instagram or Facebook or whatever apps you're using, are you certain that they're going to work? Are you certain
for sure.
You have access to them?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm certain I'm going to feel something from them.
Yeah. So what would you rate a scale 1 to 10? Just first instinct.
Yeah. Based on that, 10 for 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about variety? Variety is like change, it's challenge, it's, new things.
Oh, dude. I mean, that's going to be a 10 too, because think about just all the shifting screens and how you can just flip things and put things on. So variety is extreme on social media and also just on phones in general and technology.
Right. Okay. So what about significance is the third one? How special does your phone make you feel? Social media?
Well, my lower self, I would argue to say a 9 or 10. My higher self, I would say a 0. But yet, a lot of the times where I'm feeling like that pull to my phone, I'm rooted into that lower self, and so that does have the stage, if you will.
So we'll just say 7.
Yeah.
Love and connection is the next. How much love and connection do you get through your phone?
I do feel like I get a good amount. I'm fortunate enough, you know how it is, man. Like, you know, when you run a business on social media, I talk to a lot of really cool people. And so, yeah, that I definitely feel I'm getting there. 10.
Okay. Next need is growth. How much growth do you get having a phone, using your phone?
Based on how I use it now, a lot more than I used to, even though I used to think that I was getting growth. So I would say, I don't know, around a 7 or an 8, probably.
And last one is contribution. How much do you get to contribute using your phone?
Yeah, no, that's a high amount for sure.
Yeah.
That's a 10.
So, dude, I just want to, for the listeners, this is a concept that Tony Robbins came up with, and he's helped millions of people and discovered these 6 needs. And when you do something that meets 3 or more of these needs at a high level, that becomes an addiction. And that can be a empowering addiction or a disempowering addiction. Dude, our phones, for almost all of us, they meet all of those 6 needs in a very high level. So from a need standpoint, that is one reason why humans are so addicted to their phones, is because they literally meet all of their needs.
Wow. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It is cool, man, because I like breaking this down, right? Because I think a lot of people, you know, okay, I'll make it more personal. I think me for a long time, what I thought was that if I had an addiction to something, right, let's say a phone, right, then the answer was to stop using the phone. But that's looking at things very linear and very logical. And I think that there's many different ways to look at things, like, right, like how does a sailboat turn around if the wind's blowing the direction it's going? It doesn't just turn around because it would just have to fight the wind. It actually goes with the wind and eventually goes past it to be able to turn around, right? And so I like this because if we understand what we're actually getting on like a basis of need from what we are currently addicted to, well, then we can start actually going, okay, what else could I potentially find that could serve me in a higher regard and fulfill at least 3 of those needs, right? So now you actually have a framework from which to enact a plan, right? But I think for a lot of people, they just hear, we'll stop doing it. It's like, I mean, it's going to be really challenging. Like if you've seen Social Dilemma and that's just what they're sharing with us, it's not exactly easy to just go, you know what, I think I'm just never going to use a phone again.
Yeah,
you know, like,
exactly.
Because it's indoctrinated, right? Everyone has them. Think about what made smoking so popular back in the day. A lot of people did it. You could do it in airplanes. You could do it everywhere, right? The second they started taking that stuff away, it's not that it immediately cut down, but it has cut down a lot over the last 50 years of how many people smoke cigarettes, right? So, you know, it is very interesting that the more we start understanding these things and more we start using information to actually be applied and turn into knowledge, the more we can start actually understanding ourselves to deeper levels. And in doing so, see, even the addiction to a phone is happening for us because like, oh shit, I just learned something new about myself. I learned that I was craving these things and I was getting it from this thing, right? And so it's fucking cool, man. I love this stuff.
Dude, I'm so grateful for, just as you've mentioned many times on this, for technology. I love that I can run a business online and serve and contribute to thousands of people across the world and all do it from the palm of my hands. Like, we live in such a fucking cool time to be alive.
Oh, 100%, man. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I'm a big fan of looking at nothing as objectively bad, right? Like technology, once again, is what's allowing us to do this right now. I get to connect with people all the time that make my life more beautiful. And then there are times where I get stuck in a scroll hole, right? But that's not the phone's fault. That's my own opportunity to use the word, to do some work, right? And to look into like, what am I looking for here? Where am I feeling a lack of fulfillment or a lack of, you know, ease in my life or a lack of joy? And then what does that inform me to? Well, in most cases for me, it's like, you're biting off a lot right now and you probably need some more time to yourself, you know? And so this has been like something that I've been learning about myself a lot over the last 3 years of getting into business, right? Because before that, you know, I had worked for other people and things like that. And so I didn't really have that experience to pull from. But now that I've had a business, I can see like, oh man, when no one else tells me it's time to be done for the day, I will just keep on going like the Energizer Bunny. And my lower self is like, yes, that's awesome. My higher self realizes, dude, that's a recipe to burn out,
Yeah.
and this is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you really want to be of service, you need to be able to come to each call you do with an overflowing cup. No
Yes.
pressure with that, but like it's totally possible. Like luckily, and I know this goes for you too, and probably most of the listeners, like the argument, if you will, for living, shameless plug, a highly optimized life, right, is so that you can have these spurts of like, hey man, I got to make a program or something. I'm going to work 14-hour days for the next couple of weeks, right? But then you're also going to even that out with a yin period, right? And be able to switch between those poles. And so, yeah, it's super important to keep track of, and I'm this is, advice for myself as much as anyone else. That's why I know it so well and I can point it out, right? Because I see it in me, and I accept it in me, and therefore I accept it in others, and naturally a lot of people come to me because they're redlining and they have no other button. So it's really funny how you bring in what you are, really cool.
Yeah. Just speaking before we move forward, for your listeners, I would encourage to kind of get creative with maybe write down a couple, like 3 to 5 different pattern interrupts you can do. And what I mean by that is like, if you were to have a disc and that disc was a habit, like a CD-ROM, if you scratch that disc enough times and keep putting it into the CD player, eventually it's not going to work, right? And so a pattern interrupt is something you can do with your body and kind of just interrupt that current pattern that you know isn't serving you anymore. Like, for example, scrolling on social media for an hour. So for me, my go-to pattern interrupt whenever I catch myself in an unconscious state is I snap both my fingers and I say, boom, I'm back. I slap my chest. It's a little dramatic. You don't have to make it so dramatic. I'm a high energy guy.
Dude, I love that.
Snap my fingers, boom, I'm back. And then instantly, like just as I do that now, Ryan, I feel like a heightened level of consciousness and awareness.
Dude,
so coming up with, you can smack your ass, you can like pinch your nipples, you can do anything absurd. Like honestly, the more absurd the better, but kind of getting creative with what can I do to interrupt those unconstructive patterns. And it's powerful.
This is one of the many reasons I love you, Jacob, because I know all of your suggestions are going to be fucking fun as hell, and that's like, I think always follow the fun. Nothing says we have to grow up. We might need to grow old. That might be, mandatory, but growing up is optional, and I think that when you see like even wise elders, right? Like, when you look at the Dalai Lama, like they're all hilariously full of joy, but they can also be quick and swift when they need to, and it's like that perfect balance of king, warrior, magician, lover, right? Like that's why the book's named King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, not just warrior or not just king or not just lover or not just magician, right? Like the idea is balance.
Do you know the language for all of those combined? Like all of them integrated? No. Sovereign.
Yes.
The sovereign masculine is all of the archetypes embodied.
That makes perfect sense. I love that word sovereignty. And I think that one of the funny things I heard recently was, I was telling you a little bit, I'm getting into financial sovereignty and state nationalism and just diving into the rabbit holes, learning it. I've been finding it really fun, just getting obsessed with it. But, one of the terms that is thrown around a lot is like a sovereign citizen, right? Like that term when you're talking about like, freedom and whatnot. And he's like, do you know how fucking crazy that is to say? Because sovereign is what we're talking about. It's truly free. Citizen does not, it's the antithesis.
It's the antithesis. Free, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the word I hate.
Yes. Oh, I mean, dude, I think it's honestly like, what I've noticed, and this is not to judge, this is just me, and maybe I'll project it on everyone. And I imagine it's you too, Jacob. But for, I think, a lot of men, the last thing we want is to be told by people we know are inferior to us how to be. And I think that's what citizen, to me, that's why that word is like, ugh. Like, it just makes me think of standing in line, single file. It makes me think of, well, it's not much, but it's honest work type stuff. Which again, for me, it's just not my flavor of ice cream, right? Like for someone else, that might be what like beams them up. And that's awesome, right? That's why I say my way is not the highway by any means. But I think a lot of people that resonate with me and a lot of people that resonate with you are going to resonate with this, right? Because like I've never truly liked authority. I understand the need for certain aspects of it, but I also understand the drawbacks of it. I don't have the new answer, so I don't talk about it because I only want to talk about things that I can at least present some type of answer to. But when it comes to true sovereignty, I think it's so beneficial to be able to, have that spiritual sovereignty, but then also play that sovereignty game in the 3D realm too. Because we're here playing this game, we might as well learn how to play the game. It's like, if you're playing Grand Theft Auto, you can keep remembering it's just a game, whatever, because you're the one playing the game. but also it might be fun to be able to like level up and get new cars and do these things and buy a new apartment and all the things you can do in Grand Theft Auto. You realize that it's not everything, like you're the player behind the game, but it's also like you're playing the game, have fun with it, right? And so that's kind of like the simplest way I can put like this idea of like, I don't want to use the new term 5D, but like it makes sense. 5D versus 3D, right? Like, yes, we're fifth dimensional beings, but we're having this 3D experience. And while we're here, like Ramdas says, be here now, have fun with it. And I think one of the ways you can do that is with money and wealth and all these things. And that's why I've been getting into it, because it is a psychedelic experience, realizing that it is really a game. And you can either get mad that certain people are playing it better than you, or you can ask, what do they know that I don't? And if you apply that to every aspect of life, right? When it comes to people that are more fit than you, you can either get mad at them or you can go, what do they know that I don't? Let me go ask them. And anyone who's truly passionate about anything would be happy to talk to you about it. Like that's what I found anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff, man. So, as we're getting close to wrapping up, like, what are you really excited about these days in the work you do, right? Like, having benefited from psychedelics over the course of your life, having been able to discern when they are right for you, when it's a calling versus a craving, what are you moving into at this phase in your life? What are you really excited about, man? I love asking this question.
Professionally, I'm stoked about the planner I'm releasing called the Living Leadership Planner. Originally, it was called Living Leadership Results Planner. And, living leadership, to me, that's my business, Living Leadership International. That means to me, people who are living their truest self, living their leadership, embodying it. And this planner has taken me almost 2 years to make. And it just is a synthesis of everything I've learned over the last 15 years from some of the greatest minds in the world of how to create lasting change. And just like you said, we talked about in the beginning of the call, like writing stuff down, writing your goals down, writing the patterns that are no longer serving you, getting to know yourself through a planner and setting goals and having a clear vision for the future and just having the resources to embody your best self and do that over and over and over again. That's what this planner represents. And I'm just, that's my next big release. And it will hopefully be done in the next month by July. And I'm just, it's my life's work thus far, Ryan. So I've poured my soul into this baby, and I know it's going to help millions of people.
Dude, that is awesome, man. Yeah, like I mean, we were joking in the beginning, like I write everything down in a real notebook still. Like, it's the best way for me personally. And I think that, again, technology is great. I just like to limit my use of it. And so the less stuff I have in technology, the less I feel like my ego will literally have a really valid excuse to go use it, And so I love that, man. And Jacob, where can people find you, man? Where can they stay up to date on everything you're doing? Find the planner when it comes out, or at least stay up to date on your updates on the planner as it comes to fruition. Tell the people where they can find you, access you, and connect with you, my man.
For me and all my offerings, you can go to www.jacobmetzger.co, and I'm sure Ryan will have that in the show notes. And you can find me on Instagram at Jacob Loves Being Alive and Facebook at Jacob Metzger. And I regularly share pieces of my life, and I have a newsletter you can sign up for on my website. The website has everything. If you want to know more about me and what I can offer you and what you can get for free, I have tons of free stuff that will add tons of value to your life. You can check out my website.
I love that, man. And my last question for you, Jacob, is this. Let's say someone listens to this episode and they are excited to look into psychedelic medicines in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that you would suggest to them to allow them to use proper discernment in choosing whether these medicines are right for them in their lives?
You took away my answer because it was use your discernment.
Yeah. I mean, that is a good answer for it,
Yeah, I love what you said. I wrote it down. Follow the fun. And if psychedelics seem fun to you, if you're curious about what they can unlock in your psyche, be extraordinarily intentional about it and have the best time ever.
Yes. Dude, spoken like a true wizard, man. I love it. Oh, Jacob, it's been amazing having you here with me, man. I'll make sure to have everything in the show notes. Guys, for everyone that tuned in, we hope you enjoyed this. Go follow Jacob. He's amazing, and his name really does state how he is. Jacob loves being alive. So, okay, guys. Meeting Jacob is yet another example of how amazing social media can be. As when we first connected, I immediately felt as though we were in deep alignment with one another. Jacob's mission is to help leaders to lead more effectively and efficiently through embodying deeper layers of truth. And for any of you who are looking to dive into his world and benefit from having a heart-centered leader to assist you in achieving your goals, make sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where I will be laying out exactly how to do just that. Jacob, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for being the person you are, for doing the important work you do in helping leaders step into their dharma, and for sharing your time, wisdom, and experience with the listeners and me on the show today. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.